Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd, and it is time for a review of this new Arca album, KiCk 1. This is the latest collection of songs from producer, sound designer, songwriter, vocalist, Arca. Highly anticipated album for me because this record marks a huge era of change for the Venezuelan native. Since the first leg of the 2010s, Arca's music has shown incredible promise. For example, the insane displays of wonky, glitch, and experimental hip-hop production on her early stretch EPs. Then, immediately becoming the secret weapon of Kanye West, having a hand in multiple tracks from his record Yeezus. From there, providing the entire backdrop to LP1, the debut full-length album of alt R&B alchemist FKA Twigs. The production on that project still wows me to this day. Let's also not forget her work with Bjork and Kalela in the coming years as well. And all while this was happening, Arca was developing her own sound with a series of deeply experimental solo records. None of which really hit for me consistently, but still the sound design, especially on Zen and especially on Mutant, was particularly bold. On Arca's self-titled record in 2017, we began to see an eerie and dystopian blend of ambient, art, and glitch pop take hold. Vocals also becoming more of a focal point, leading to some strangely beautiful and almost operatic highlights like Sin Rumbo or Anoche. But oddly, all of that feels eons ago when thinking about how Arca presents herself today. We had the announcement of her non-binary identity, her putting herself out there more in the promotional material, in the music videos. Arca is like an entirely new artist at this point, so going into this record, it was like the slate had just been wiped clean for me, like my expectations had just dropped. Or that was until I began to hear some of the teaser tracks, which for me were a mixed bag. There is Non-Binary, which is a track I'm not surprised ended up the intro of this thing. Lyrically, it does read like a statement of intent or a confrontational statement of self, also encouraging others to do the same in their own way. The most surprising thing about this track being Arca gently and somewhat charismatically rapping over a very primal instrumental. Some of the vocals and lyricism here are weak, sure, but the most confusing thing about this track is that after all this time, Arca still doesn't seem that intent on structuring things and tying things up in her songs effectively. There is a dramatic intro and build-up on this track, a hard-hitting refrain, a bridge, and then it just sort of trails off into nothing. The following time, I would argue, has an even lower impact with a lot of layered, spacey, and new age synth passages, disembodied vocals too, all of which comes together like a build-up that never really builds up to much of anything. The following MEQUETREFE is an even shorter listen, but its visceral nature makes it so much more impressive in my view. This track is a piece of dynamic, nuanced, punchy and glitchy reggaeton, whose production is just insane. The details in this track are just mind-boggling. Arca could have done an entire record of songs in this vein and it would have sufficed. Especially with that dark bassy transition at the midpoint of the song, it sounds like just IDM and Flying Lotus from another planet. We also have KiCk featuring Rosalia stylized as KLK, an exciting crossover with one of the most talented singers out there right now, with Arca essentially using Rosalia's voice in the mix here, manipulating it, just treating it like an instrument, like anything else here, while still maintaining the beautiful and unique qualities of her singing. Loving the glitches and the grooves on this track too. It is a futuristic Latin pop banger. In so many ways, this track is as over the top as possible in the best way possible. The dizzying vocal treatments, the rigid, somewhat industrial-ish synth lead, those awesome rhythmic and vocal breakdowns, and the guns reloading everywhere. So these were the teasers to the record. I loved a couple, the other two not as much. In the end, the track list on this thing ends up being a bit of a potpourri of bangers and drifters, songs and moments that essentially trail off or don't really climax in a gratifying way, despite maybe having a really cool idea or two in the mix. Whether that be the manic singing and rapping intense electronics all over the track Regggaeton, which really could have used another passage, a build-up, a transition, something to break up the monotony of this one one singular idea outside of a very ungratifying ending. Then the song afterwards with Björk kicks off as a very wondrous, chilling, beautiful vocal piece. The instrumental pairs perfectly with her voice, which is not surprising considering their work in the past. Vocally, the song trades off to Arca, whose singing is not nearly as strong, but really what ends up making the song feel pretty underwhelming is that from that point it just slowly trails downward into nothing. There's no other offerings or passages beyond this point other than just slowly deflating. This record, thankfully, is a little backloaded. There is a stronger showing in the track list on the second half, in my view. There is the disorienting Rager Watch featuring Shy Girl, the bassy groove and speedy little rap flows and melting passages of synthesizers and vocals are all ear candy for the insane. There is also the booming and demented Rip the Slit, and Arca flexes her insane IDM and deconstructed production muscles once again on CHIQUI featuring Sophie, where much of the track is painted by these very quickly repeating Manelo, 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 but even faster than that. It's like just a voice stuck in my head, driving me to the brink. Behind that, these aggressive, punchy rhythms, and then suddenly transitioning into these haunting, dramatic passages of vocals and droning synth tones. It's such a roller coaster. It is sensory overload. It is emotional overload. It's so gratifying and so confusing at the same time. The record's final moments I thought were just okay. There is the song MEQUETREFE, which is a somewhat hazy, dreamy, heavily layered, trap-inspired piece that doesn't hit too hard. It's kind of breezy, over and done with before you even realize it's going on. Then there is the closer No Queda Nada, which is a stripped-back ballad that features Arca's voice over a very simple and dramatic art pop instrumental, very Björk-inspired. Not blown away by it, but it is one of the most fleshed out songs in the track list too, so can't fault it too much. Overall, I thought this record was kind of flawed, but still it managed to be my favorite Arca album so far. Best material on any project I've heard up until this point. Loved the crossovers, loved the experiments, loved the boldness. There are some duds and there are some lulls in the track list, sure, but this project is still a great showing, and I hope just the start of a new exciting era for Arca. Feeling a decent to strong 7 on this one. Transition, have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Arca, forever.